Let's take a look at some of the new interesting features on the Wrangler JL as we take this apart. This is my first JL, so I'm learning a lot. As you can see, the radiator's been removed. Let's take a look at that over here. As you can see, it looks like the drive shafts are still Zeppas, which is probably okay for a stock 3.6. This is our radiator, transmission cooler, and AC condenser. This is an aluminum radiator with plastic tanks, just like the JK. This is interesting. This is a transmission cooler. Notice that they removed it from the bottom of the AC condenser and made it standalone. Now, it doesn't appear to be as big as the Pentastar transmission cooler or the W580 cooler, but it does seem to be a little bit thicker. Then this is our AC condenser, which is sufficiently large, and this is our dryer for the AC system. Looking in the engine compartment, we've got the Pentastar engine here. This is now our vacuum pump for our brakes. This is interesting. This is the power steering pump. It looks like a pool motor. Look at the size of the cables on this power steering pump. This is what's going to supply hydraulic pressure to the steering gear. This is going to be interesting to see how it plays out, because when you go to oversized tires, I'm not sure how this power steering pump is going to play into going from a 29-inch tire to a 40-inch tire. I'm sure Chrysler thought about that, and the size of those cables mean this pump's probably capable of putting enough pressure out to run the larger tires. We still have a traditional steering gear over here. It looks very large, and it looks like it might be made out of aluminum or some lightweight metal. So they did stay with the steering gear and did not go to a rack. Now here's something that's even more interesting. It looks to me like we have a heated EGR valve. These hoses here actually go back to what appears to be an EGR valve, which is up here, comes back down, and this is water cooled or water heated, whichever one. This looks like a EGR valve temp sensor. We used to run these back in the 1980s. It would tell the computer what the temperature of the exhaust gas was. So it looks like Chrysler is staying with an EGR valve, which is very unfortunate. I think combustion technology is at a point where we can eliminate the EGR valve. But EGR valves reduce NOx by lowering combustion chamber temperature. They do that by introducing inert or non-flammable gas into the combustion chamber, which lowers the temperature so the NOx is not formed. But it does look like they've tied that into the water cooling system. They've also tied the transmission into the water cooling system. They have some additional hoses coming off that go back to a transmission cooler on the side of the transmission. So again, it looks like Chrysler is taking cooling the transmission seriously, not like they did in the early JK. Here we have the engine control module, which is now mounted in line rather than sideways like it was in the JK. Looks like things can get pretty crowded over here. This is the hydraulic control unit, or the HCU, and the ABS module. Of course, we got our master cylinder. This does look larger to me than the JK. I do understand that they're going to put some additional bottles here, maybe for the turbo intercooler. There's going to be a coolant bottle for that. The coolant bottle goes over here for the main engine, and then it drops down into these hoses over here. We've got a lot of hoses on this JL, which I'm not a big fan of running a lot of hoses on an engine, because hoses are usually the first thing to wear out. It would have been nice if they had simplified this instead of complicating it. We're still running the backwards alternator. Battery's been turned sideways like the Pentastar, which gives us good room. This is a double overhead cam 4-valve engine, which means it's wide. That should give us plenty of room for the LT engine, because the LT engine is still overhead valve. They did add direct injectors into the valve covers, which raised them up a little bit, but my guess is the LT engine is going to look small in this engine compartment compared to this Pentastar engine. They did relocate the TIPM. As you can see, it's now where the battery used to be. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I can only hope that they improve this TIPM over the JK series. Look at this power distribution here. Chrysler really got serious with power and ground distribution. Look at this ground distribution. And we've tracked most of the issues with the JKs down, whether their engine's swapped or not, to poor power or ground distribution. Let's start back here, and then we'll work our way forward. Here is the rear exhaust section that goes over the axle, and look at this pipe. It looks like they've hydroformed it. It's flat so that you get axle clearance, and that was always a problem with the JK. We got a massive track bar here, not adjustable, but not a big deal. I'm sure the aftermarket guys will handle that real quick. Here's our axle breather. This is a transfer case. It does have a fill and a drain plug. That's nice. Our Zeppa cone flanges. Here's our cables for the transmission and the transfer case. Now this is really weird, this linkage and complex. I'm thinking we're going to simplify this quite a bit, although I will say that the transmission shifter really does feel good. However, the transfer case shifter, you got to fight it just like you did in the JK. We still have the Pentastar loop in the exhaust. We're still bringing the passenger side over underneath the transmission, so that probably means it's pretty close to the bottom of the cross member. Got an axle disconnect on this, and this looks electronic. If you remember the early Jeeps, they had like the old XJs, they had a vacuum disconnect. What this will do is disconnect the axles from the center pumpkin, allowing freer steering and less friction. And I'm guessing that's going to be controlled by the TIPM. Here you can see the lower hose with the additional outlets for transmission. In fact, while we're down here, let's look at that transmission cooler. So here we go right here. You can see the cooling lines coming into it, and then there's the actual cooler itself. Very interesting. Looks like Chrysler is taking cooling seriously. They're selling a lot of these JKs over in the Arab countries, in areas that are very hot, and I know the JK had a hard time with that. We got pretty similar looking engine mounts. We have some aluminum stands that come off. Doesn't look like we're running any hydraulic mounts here, but I don't believe any of these Pentastar engines support air fuel management or multiple displacement. Actually, looks like this Jeep had a coolant leak. This is obviously aged coolant, and it's purple or pink. The starter motor, what I'm thinking about is stop-start. This engine's constantly stopping and starting, and I would thought they would have gone to a larger starter motor, but maybe this is a high-quality starter motor. It does seem like some of these castings are already starting to oxidize, and this is a Nevada vehicle. I wouldn't expect that. Nice to see they put some heat shields on these control arms. I'm not sure if these are as long as a JK. JK is a mid-arm. These look a little bit shorter to me, but I could be wrong. Got a pretty massive pitman arm. Look at the size of this drag link. Wow. They are doing a low steer. And if we look at the track bar, which comes in here, you can see it's exactly in line with the drag link, so we're not going to get any bump steer. Now, if guys are going to start flipping this, they might have a problem. Look at the size of this spindle, and look how massive this tie rod is and how it attaches. You get a ball joint here, and then you have this massive bar, and look at that, it is adjustable here, so we're able to set our toe in here. This track bar looks pretty massive. It is not adjustable, it appears, so they're going to be selling a lot of those in the aftermarket. This drag link, they went to a single bolt instead of the two with the sleeve, and they've got an adjustment collar here that's pretty nicely knurled. And look how massive this drag link is. I like that. And it's a massive tie rod. I think we're going to see a lot less death wobble on the JL compared to the JK. Interesting looking C here. We got a couple of ball joints. Hopefully they've improved the quality of the ball joints, went to some kind of metal or bronze joint. Let's see, what else do I notice here? Typical cross member bolts in just like the JK. Typical gas tank shield bolts in just like the JK. I do like this shield better. Not sure if this is composite. This looks like a composite shield, not metal. What this will do is keep heat away from the fuel tank. When you have full skid plates on these JKs and you run the exhaust on top of the skid plates, they can build up enough heat to melt the tank. Looks like Chrysler got ahead of the game with that. Here's our fuel line and our purge line, pretty similar to the JK. I like to see these go up to the top, and that way it keeps them away from the heat of the exhaust. I want to show you something interesting on this transmission. This has park, reverse, neutral, drive, and then it kicks over to a manual gate. If I were to shift this, really all I have, that's it. It's like an old motorcycle. First, second, third, fourth, fifth. Interesting the way ZF implemented the shifting on this transmission. Fortunately, we're going to go to a 8L90, which has nearly twice the capacity of this transmission. The 8L90 is good for close to 700 foot-pounds of torque, where this one's only good for about 350. They did add a nice cooler to the transmission, albeit right next to the exhaust, and they did water cool it. Now this isn't a Rubicon, so we don't have locking axles and we don't have a sway bar disconnect. This is a Sport S. These converters get really hot, and they come right off of the cylinder head, which kind of makes me nervous when you're running 2,000 degrees plus right off an aluminum cylinder head that has valves going up and down. But it seems like they've got that death tick thing pretty much sorted by 2014, 2015, so hopefully we'll see some better mileage out of these Pentastar engines. While I'm here, I want to take a look at this lower valance. Guys, this lower valance actually does serve a purpose. It deflects air and allows better aerodynamics in your JK. And it's somewhat of a joke to talk about aerodynamics in a Jeep Wrangler. However, they did make a lot of effort to clean up the Wrangler JL, and they have. But even on the JK, this lower valance does serve a purpose. It does help with the airflow and the aerodynamics. We got some fog lights here. These fog lights operate similar to the JK, where you have to have it in low, not in high, and then flip the switch. These engine mounts do look very similar to the JK, so our easy mounts are going to be a really close fit. Looking at the rear here, not much has changed. We got our cross-flow muffler, e-brake cables. I believe that's our tire pressure monitor module sitting up there. Fuel tank looks pretty large. I'm not sure how it compares to the JK, but it looks definitely over 20 gallons. I like the way they did this pipe. They did put a clamp right in the middle over the axle, but it's always been tough to get this section of pipe away from everything. We got the sway bar going up and down, we got the axle going up and down. I kind of like these wheels. They're alloy. Looks like it took a lot of weight to balance them. And they'll probably be replaced. I do want to stay with something around 17 inches though, give us some sidewall. This JK right now is getting about 17.5 miles to the gallon with the tires that are on it, and they're pretty small and light. So that's about it for this video. I think the next video you're going to see the body's going to be off of this, and we'll take even a closer look.